Catus Maximus here, this time with another roundhead ratchet, this time my P&C 100 series. This is a little bit confusing because it's a P&C 100 series ratchet, but it does have that's not the part number, it does have a separate part number. I believe this ratchet did come out after Proto bought them out. P&C was a Oregon-based hand tool company that Proto bought out, I believe, sometime in the 60s. And then over several years afterwards, they slowly started tapering down and basically closing out the P&C name. But a lot of people do have fond memories of P&C tools just because they were pretty well priced for a pretty decent quality tool. Now this one doesn't have the Titus anvil. It's a bit older, definitely seen some days, but it actually still does operate. Not super definitively, but we'll take it apart and give it a cleaning. So that's just kind of the deal with this video. I was just talking about another roundhead ratchet that I actually haven't had on the channel or even owned before. I find this one interesting. Issues with lesser roundhead ratchets is that when you're using them, sometimes when you go the back turn, it will get some friction against the reverse wheel and cause the ratchet to self-reverse. This is also something that happens with not so great modern pairhead ratchets, but for different reasons. So in roundhead ratchets, there's been a variety of designs to prevent that from happening. And in here, what we have is apparently some type of collar that's going around the reverse lever so that the body of the ratchet isn't interacting with that, because it does have a pretty soft detent. It is pretty easy to reverse. Anyway, one thing I was going to mention is this is a reasonably compact head on this ratchet. And I do like to point this out, as many times the notion that roundhead ratchets are a lot bigger than their pairhead counterparts indeed aren't true. We can see here that this is just a little bit wider than this Titan pairhead ratchet, but by just a very small amount. And if we take a look at how tall it is, it's a little bit taller, but it's actually very close to a standard pairhead size. Anyway, most of these ratchets are either held in with some type of a snap or some type of a snap ring. This is a coiled spring, or I'm not sure what these are called, but it's a spiral spring. It has a little notch that you would pry out with like a little screwdriver here just to get the corner of this started. And you just pry it out. Some of these that are inset, i.e. inside a counter bar, are harder to deal with than ones that are like this when they're just on the outside, because then when they're on the outside like this, it's just super easy just to go around and pop this little guy off. And that's all it takes to pop that ring out. Let's take a look at the mechanism that we've got inside here. That's interesting here. What we've got is an interesting little collar right here. That's some kind of a little spacer. Interesting too is this appears that you can actually reassemble this ratchet in either direction. Many ratchets, the hole on one side is smaller than the other, so they can only be reassembled in one direction. This is actually unidirectional. If we take a look at the mechanism here, we can see, well, one, that there was a little bit of water, some rust, or at least humidity in there. Not super great. It's an okay mechanism. I'd say that this is beefier than the SK, just because this is a little bit wider. But it's essentially like very similar to an SK mechanism. Not super great. And the reason I mention that is I've done quite a few roundhead ratchets, and we've found with like Bonnies, even Cows, Protos, that many of those will have two pawls, two independent pawls, or like the New Britons, they have essentially a floating pawl design in a roundhead. Very robust mechanisms. And so that's why I say I'm disappointed, is that this is a mechanism that is reliable and is essentially plenty strong, but it's definitely what I wouldn't call a top tier mechanism. Here are just a little bit of lube and a little bit of wiping it down. Now this pawl is actually moving pretty well. I usually don't take apart completely the heads just because it's a hassle to put it back together. Like on this style, it's a real simple design. This reverse lever here has a little stem that sticks down and has a hole with a spring and a little steel pin or detent, which is actually pressing against the back of this pole. So when you rotate this, it's just moving that spring-loaded detent from this side to this side, and that's what's causing it to rock back and forth, and also provides the spring tension. And one of the other issues I'm not super fond of that design is just because even though it works, as soon as you get just a little, it doesn't have a lot of force. And when you get just a little bit of crud in there, it really starts to have a lot of friction and does not engage fully, and you start getting issues with it skipping. And so that's why I'm also not super fond of this style. But as long as you keep them basically cleaned and oiled, then they will work pretty reliably. As we can see, just from just a real light kind of cleanup, it's surprising how much dirt was just inside that ratchet on just a basic cleanup. And here we are all back together again, and we can give it a listen. Certainly much better. That's a much better sound. The switch actually had a little bit of stiffness with that crud in it. Now it's just super light. This is actually excessively light. This is one that you will accidentally bump. So as much as I like this old ratchet, now I've taken it apart, I realize that it's, quite frankly, it's just mid-tier when it compares to, once again, Cals, Bonnies, many actual Protos, New Britons, Mustangs. There's actually quite a few ratchets that exceed the build quality of this one. So it's kind of neat to have as part of the collection of a P&C 100. But this isn't one that I would go hunting around on eBay for or anything like that, unless you're really into P&C tools or you're just trying to collect them. Certainly don't pay very much for it, just because it's really, you know, not the greatest design. Anyway, if you... If you haven't subscribed to the Catus Maximus channel, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.